It's time for a bit of a reality check, folks. Today we're talking 3 reasons why you should be pessimistic about the 2024-25 Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Thursday, July 11th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at LockedNHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. Been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years now. Was a full-time hockey news writer at The Score before jumping on and beginning hosting this podcast. And, I hate to do it today, but we got to talk about some reasons why we should not be as hopeful about this team heading into next season. Don't worry, tomorrow I'll jump on and do 3 reasons to be optimistic about the 2024-25 Bruins. But today, again, a bit of a reality check here as we look at the roster as it stands. And the number one reason to be pessimistic about the Boston Bruins in 2024-25 is the lack of an elite goaltending tandem. Make no mistake, the reason why the Boston Bruins were so good this past season, and even back in the record-setting regular season of 2022-23, was because they had one of, if not the best goaltending tandem in the NHL. And that has been broken up by Don Sweeney when he decided to trade Linus Ullmark to the Ottawa Senators in a deal that included the 25th overall pick, Marcus Stelic, and Joonas Korpisalo. Now, if you look at this past year's stats, 5-on-5 in the regular season, the Boston Bruins ranked 3rd among all teams in the NHL with a 92.98 team save percentage. You go down to look where the Ottawa Senators ranked, and they were 3rd from the bottom with a mark of 89.95. You kick that up to all situations. The Bruins were, again, 3rd with a save percentage of 91.18. The Ottawa Senators, 31st at 88.45. Now, that wasn't all on Korpisalo, as his counterpart, Anton Forsberg, wasn't much better. But at the same time, it shows you how important it was for the Bruins to have not only Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark, but to play them off each other as bona fide starters each and every night. The fact that there was no real drop-off in performance between Swayman and Ullmark, that is something that a lot of teams cannot boast. So a lot of teams have considerable drop-offs between their one option and the backup. The Bruins had 1A and a 1B, and it worked perfectly for them over the past few years. You have to filter out their stats in terms of ice time down to 1,000 minutes of play, and you see that they had an almost even split. Swayman played 44 games in the regular season, Ullmark played 41. There was like 100 minutes between them, so not that much of a gap in terms of actual game time, maybe 2 games. Ullmark had a .930 save percentage. Jeremy Swayman had a .929 save percentage at 5-on-5, which is pretty remarkable. If you look at where Joonas Korpisalo comes in, he ranked 49th in the NHL among goalies who played at least 1,000 minutes with a .905 save percentage. His counterpart, Anton Forsberg, not much better at .897. So at least Korpisalo was the better goalie, but you're going from 6th and 7th in the NHL in terms of 5-on-5 save percentage to 7th and 49th. He was, interestingly, tied with Andrei Vasilevsky and Elvis Merzlikins, Mackenzie Blackwood, ahead of guys like Joseph Woll, Philip Gustafsson, just behind Jake Ottinger. So he's kind of average, I guess you could say, to poor. Not among the top goalies in the NHL by any stretch of the imagination. So to go from Swayman and Ullmark to Swayman and Korpisalo, even if goalie Bob can work some magic and get more out of Korpisalo, there's going to be a drop-off. He's not Linus Ullmark. It's just a fact. I mean, Joonas Korpisalo is not Linus Ullmark. And a lot of people say, well, Ullmark wasn't very good before his time with Boston. No, he was. He came to Boston with like a .916 save percentage in his previous 2 seasons with the Buffalo Sabres, who were not a very good team. He's going to help the Senators, and his loss will hurt the Bruins. And there's not going to be an even split, obviously. Once Swayman is signed, he's going to play the lion's share of the games. But there's no telling what that extra workload will do to him and what kind of drop-off there will be in the games that Korpisalo starts, and whether those can be scheduled losses if he just does not turn it around. He's not very good. He allowed, I believe, a goal on the first or second shot in 20-something games last season. You can't be behind the 8 ball, especially if you are lacking scoring depth as it is, which the Boston Bruins are. And we'll discuss that aspect of why we could be pessimistic about this team coming up after the break. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. And the eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And while you're on YouTube, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories, news, opinions, and analysis from across the Locked On Sports universe. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we're talking about a few reasons why we should be pessimistic about the Boston Bruins heading into 2024-25. We discussed the loss of Linus Ullmark and a drop-off in performance that perhaps goalie coach Bob Essensa can redeem, but not likely to the level of Linus Ullmark, where the Bruins had the best tandem in the NHL. Another deficiency for this team is lack of scoring depth, and that was something that already reared its head in the postseason. The Bruins didn't necessarily lose to the Panthers because of poor defense. They quite simply had issues scoring. At 5-on-5, they ranked 13th in terms of, that was at all strengths. They ranked 13th in terms of goals for, which put them at 54.34 advantage. At 5-on-5, the Bruins dipped a bit, ranking, well, they ranked 11th in goals for at 5-on-5. Actually, let's double check that. Yes, they ranked 12th with goals for at 5-on-5. However, they did not have a positive shot attempt differential. They were at 47.03. Their expected goals were an even 50%. High danger attempts were 50.27. So they could, and that ranked 19th. They could really use some help offensively. And that was with Jake DeBrusk and Danton Heinen in the lineup. And they provided some much needed depth scoring. Look at the playoffs. These guys were top 6 fixtures for this team. Yes, you've added Elias Lindholm, who has posted 40 goals in the past. That may have been an outlier, likely was an outlier. He should still contribute, on the same level as Jake DeBrusk down the middle, if not better. But they're still looking for scoring on the wings. We discussed this yesterday in terms of an opportunity that, what's more likely? Does Fabian Lysell jump up and grab a spot on the wings? Do they look for help in free agency? Do they eventually make a trade? Whatever the case, they do need some scoring depth. Besides David Pastrnak, there's really nobody on this team that you can count on to be a scoring threat night in and night out. When you look at their stats last season, you see a remarkable drop-off in production between Pastrnak and the next highest scorer, who was Brad Marchand. There's an 18-goal difference. There was a 43-point difference. And that was with Marchand playing a full 82 games. We'll discuss this in a little bit, but he's getting up there, and we may not be able to count on him as much offensively moving forward, considering he's already at age 36. Pastrnak had 47 goals, 63 assists. You had Marchand with 29 goals, 38 assists for 67 points. Only 2 other guys had more than 50 points. That was Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha. Charlie McAvoy ranked 5th on the team in scoring. And then you had guys, Trent Frederick, who did not average even half a point per game. He was at 40 points in 82 games. Morgan Geekie, 39 points. And then an even bigger drop-off. The bottom of the top 10, you had Matt Poitras, who had 15 points in 33 games, and Brandon Carlo, who had 14 points in 76 games. Are you going to get more than what you got last season from Coyle and Zacha, who had career years? Is there more offensively to be mined from Charlie McAvoy? You should be able to get more out of Trent Frederick, especially if he takes Jake DeBrusk's spot in the top 6 and is given a prime opportunity, give him some power play time as well. Maybe you can get a bit more out of Morgan Geekie, but the Bruins do need some scoring help. That's just a fact. And, where's it going to come from? These stats, of course, don't include Jake DeBrusk, who did have a pretty productive year last year. 19 goals, 21 assists, same point total as Trent Frederick. Those were disappointing numbers. I was hoping that he would push for 30, and that's probably why the Bruins weren't willing to commit, and he went to Vancouver. But whether it be via trade, whether it be via free agency, whether you're looking at Daniel Sprong or Kyler Yamamoto or Philip Zadina or Alex Nylander, who I think is a decent option. The Bruins already signed the 5th and 26th picks from the 2016 draft. Why not take a flyer on the 8th overall pick, Alex Nylander, who had a pretty productive run there with Columbus near the end of the season. Pretty surprising that he wasn't qualified, to be honest. He's an option out there that could add some added offense. Just take a look at all the available options. But right now, I'm not very optimistic about the Bruins in terms of their scoring ability. And while they did, they're harder to play against. They're bigger with Lindholm and Zadorov. They're harder to play against. But this was a team that scored 14th ranked, 263 goals last season. Maybe not good enough. They need to add some more scoring to the lineup somehow, some way, whether or not it's the new guys, Lindholm, Zadorov could chip in, or whether it's a young guy that needs to step up or someone from outside. I'm a bit leery of the fact that they didn't add a ton offensively, electing instead to invest in Zadorov over a scoring winger. And we'll see if that, comes back to bite them in a moment. Another factor, like I mentioned, Brad Marchand not getting any younger. We'll discuss the aging captain here as the podcast continues. If you're looking to grab MLB tickets this summer, well, Gametime is the place that makes it getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and a low price guarantee. So Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. I've already used it this summer to go to a Blue Jays game. You can grab it to go to a Red Sox game. All you have to do is download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Gametime, last minute tickets at the lowest price guaranteed. I mean, we got to admit it, friends. Brad Marchand's game is not quite where it was in the past. And despite playing a full 82 games last season, he equaled the output he had from 2022-23 in 9 more games. 67 points in a full 82 games. Of course, the previous season was interrupted by off-season surgery that took him out of the lineup for the beginning of that season. But it looks as though his point per game days are behind him. That rise began around 2016-17 with 85 points in 80 games. It culminated with a 100-point season back in 2018-19. The fact that they didn't win the Cup in Brad Marchand's best season of his career when he had 100 points, 23 points in 24 playoff games, that's surely a disappointment. He then had 87 points in 70 games in 2019-20. He had 69 points in 53 games during the COVID-shortened season, 80 points in 70 games in 2021-22, and then back-to-back 67-point seasons, with this past season being his lowest point per game mark in quite some time. And it's no disrespect intended, but it's time to ask whether perhaps he's slowing down a bit and whether they can indeed count on him to put up elite offensive numbers moving forward, or even high-end offensive numbers. 0.82 points per game, nothing to sneeze at, but it's a far cry from the 1.3 points, 1.24 points a game, 1.27, 1.25, that stretch that he had from 2017 to 2021. The 0.82 was his lowest mark since 2015-16. And again, probably can't count on Marchand putting up big numbers, which just magnifies the need for scoring help elsewhere. If you have a line of Marchand, Coyle, Geeky, or Marchand, Patra, Geeky, Marchand, Coyle, Lysell, or Marchand, Coyle, or Marchand, Poitras, whoever, is that going to be a dominant enough offensive line to take the focus off Zacha, Lindholm, Pasternak? I'm not quite sure. Now, I love Brad Marchand. He's been on the podcast. We've had fun on social media. He's a great guy. I do believe he still has a lot of gas in the tank, but I'm not sure we can count on him to have, 30-goal, 70-point seasons from this point out. He is due a contract extension. He will be paid. He will be a core player for this team as captain for probably a few more years. But in terms of that high-end offensive contributions, we saw him explode in the playoffs there with those huge games against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But he did fall off a bit in the series against the Florida Panthers. He had 10 points in 11 games overall. But against the Panthers, when the Bruins were trying to claw back, he was a bit quiet offensively. He had 2 assists in those games against the Panthers. Of course, he was injured by Sam Bennett, and he had 0 points in the 2 games that he was able to play in. Whether or not he was still feeling that effects of that incident, not quite sure, but he did play 20 minutes in the game 6 that they lost. Of course, only 10 minutes in the previous game that he was knocked out of. 2 assists in the first 2 games, and no points over the final 3 games against Toronto, a series that they narrowly won. So, yeah, take that with a grain of salt. I'm sure he will remain a big game performer from time to time, but not quite the offensive threat, and compound that with lack of scoring elsewhere and perhaps a more leaky crease. And those are some reasons to be a bit pessimistic about the Bruins this coming season. Now, having said that, there are reasons to be optimistic about this team, and we will cover those on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. We'll also bring you all the latest on the black and gold. Hopefully, there will be some word about a Jeremy Swayman extension sooner than later. If that happens, I'll be sure to jump on YouTube and do a quick short and bring you all the details on that. But for now, we're talking about reasons to be pessimistic. Tomorrow, reasons to be optimistic. Thank you so much for taking some time to listen today, friends. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will talk to you here tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.